Jesus stopped at the entrance of the garden and turned to 8 of his disciples, telling them to sit and wait while he went to pray. But he took only 3 with him, Peter, James, and John, the same 3 who had witnessed his transfiguration and the raising of Jairus' daughter, the closest of the close. And here the Gospels describe something deeply unsettling, something that always stops me. Because Mark, who likely recorded Peter's own memories, uses a very specific Greek word to describe what happened to Jesus. A word that means not just fear, but overwhelming shock, a kind of inner collapse, a terror so deep it feels like the soul is being torn apart from within. And Jesus says to them, "My soul is overwhelmed with sorrow to the point of death." And this is not a metaphor, because the word used implies a level of anguish so intense that it can actually kill a person, a psychological pressure so severe that the heart itself could fail. And this raises a question. Why? Why this man who walked on water, who calmed storms, who stood unafraid before crowds and authorities? Why here, in a dark garden, does he experience something so intense, so unbearable? Theologians have debated this for centuries. But before we go into their explanations, let's follow what happened next, step by step, minute by minute. Because Jesus asks the 3 disciples to stay awake and watch, then walks a short distance away, about the distance of a stone's throw, and falls to the ground, not kneeling as was customary, but collapsing face down into the earth, a posture of complete surrender and distress. And there he begins to pray, and Mark preserves the very word Jesus uses to address God. Abba, a deeply personal, intimate word, something like Father, but closer to Dad. A word no adult Jew would normally use in formal prayer because it was too familiar, almost too bold. Yet this is how Jesus speaks. Abba, Father, everything is possible for you. Take this cup from me, yet not what I will, but what you will. 3 short sentences, but inside them is an entire universe. First, the intimacy of trust, then the honest prospa to avoid suffering, and finally, complete surrender. And this prayer is perhaps the most powerful in all of Scripture, and at the same time the most human, because it contains fear, hope, pain, and obedience all at once. And Jesus prays for so long that when he returns to the disciples, he finds them asleep. And it's important not to judge them too harshly, because this was the night of Passover. They had just finished a long ritual meal with multiple cups of wine. They had walked all day, and it was deep into the night, a time when the human body simply shuts down. Yet Jesus turns specifically to Peter, the one who spoke the loudest and promised the most, and says, "Simon, are you asleep? Could you not keep watch for 1 hour? Watch and pray so that you will not fall into temptation. The spirit is willing, but the flesh is weak." And this famous line, in this moment, is not a cliche but a raw truth spoken by someone experiencing that very tension between spirit and body in its deepest form. Then Jesus goes away and prays again and again, 3 times returning and 3 times finding them asleep. And here Luke, who was a physician, adds a detail that the others do not mention. He writes that an angel appeared to strengthen him, and that being in anguish, he prayed more earnestly, and his sweat became like drops of blood falling to the ground. And this is not poetic exaggeration. This is a real medical condition known as hematidrosis, where under extreme stress, the capillaries burst and blood mixes with sweat, something documented in rare cases of intense fear or trauma, meaning that what Jesus experienced in that garden was so intense that his body reacted as if it were under the most extreme form of human suffering imaginable. And this leads us back to the question, what exactly was he afraid of? Was it physical pain? Was it the cross? Because crucifixion was one of the most brutal forms of execution ever created, designed not just to kill, but to humiliate and torture for hours or even days. And any human would fear that. But there is something deeper, because in Jewish understanding, death on a tree carried the idea of curse, and to be crucified meant to take upon oneself that curse. And even beyond that, there is the theological idea that Jesus was preparing to bear the full weight of human sin, something beyond physical suffering, something like complete separation from the Father, which he later expressed on the cross with the cry, my God, why have you forsaken me?" A kind of experience no human language can fully describe, and perhaps it was all of these things combined. Physical fear, spiritual burden, and absolute loneliness, all pressing down at once. And then everything shifts because Jesus returns to his disciples for the third time, finds them sleeping again, and says, "Enough. The hour has come. The Son of Man is betrayed into the hands of sinners. Rise, let us go. Here comes my betrayer." And that word "enough" is not a cry of panic, but a statement of decision, because something has changed inside him. The one who moments ago fell to the ground asking for the cup to pass, now stands up and walks forward to meet what is coming. And this is what theologians call the true victory of Gethsemane, the inner battle won before the external events even begin. And even as Jesus was still speaking, light suddenly appeared in the distance. Torches, many torches, moving through the darkness toward the garden. And John tells us that it was not just a small group, but a detachment of soldiers along with temple guards, armed with weapons. And the Greek word used suggests a cohort that could number anywhere from a few hundred to several hundred men, a serious force sent into the night, and leading them all was Judas. And there is a striking detail here that many overlook, because when Jesus stepped forward and asked, "Whom are you seeking?" and they answered, "Jesus of Nazareth," he replied, "I am he." And at those words, something unexpected happened. The entire group stepped back and fell to the ground, armed soldiers collapsing before an unarmed man. And scholars debate why. Some say it was the shock of his boldness. Others suggest confusion in the dark. But others point to something deeper, because in Greek, Jesus says, "Ego eimi," I am. The very phrase used in the scriptures as the name of God revealed to Moses. And whether they understood it or not, something in that moment shook them, but it lasted only seconds. They got up again, regrouped, and surrounded him. And then Judas stepped forward, and here comes one of the most famous and painful moments in history. The kiss of betrayal. And in that culture, a kiss was a normal greeting, especially between a student and his teacher. It was not suspicious, which made it the perfect signal in the dark, among men dressed similarly. But Matthew preserves Jesus' response, and it is chilling in its calmness, because he says, "Friend, do what you came for." Not traitor, not Judas, but friend. A word that stands there like a stone in the road, impossible to ignore. And immediately after that, everything happens fast. Peter, impulsive, emotional Peter, draws his sword and strikes the servant of the high priest, cutting off his ear, and John even preserves the servant's name. Malchus, a small but powerful detail, and Jesus immediately stops Peter, telling him to put the sword away, saying, "Shall I not drink the cup the Father has given me?" The same cup he had prayed about just moments before. But now there is no hesitation, no prosba for it to pass, only acceptance. And then Luke adds another detail that the others do not. Jesus reaches out and heals the servant's ear. In the middle of his own arrest, he performs one last act of healing, not for a friend, but for an enemy. And this is the final miracle before he is taken. And after that, the disciples scatter, panic breaking them apart as they flee into the darkness. And Mark includes a strange and almost personal detail about a young man following behind, wrapped only in a linen cloth. And when the soldiers try to seize him, he escapes, leaving the cloth behind and running away naked into the night. And many believe this was Mark himself, silently placing his signature into the story, saying, "I was there." And then Jesus is bound, his hands tied, and led away from the garden. And pause for a moment and picture it. The same valley they crossed earlier, now in reverse. The same path, the same night. But everything has changed. Behind him remains the garden where he fell to the ground and prayed. And ahead of him lies interrogation, trial, and crucifixion. And now we turn to Judas again, because his story is not simple. It is one of the greatest mysteries in the entire narrative. Was it greed, as Matthew suggests, since Judas himself approached the priests asking what they would give him, and they paid him 30 pieces of silver? But that amount was not large, roughly the value of a slave or a month's wages, not enough to justify such betrayal. So maybe it was disappointment, because many in that time expected a political messiah, a leader who would overthrow Rome, restore Israel, and reign as king. And if Judas believed that, then for 3 years he watched Jesus do none of those things, instead speaking about loving enemies and riding into the city on a donkey. And perhaps the betrayal was an attempt to force Jesus' hand, to push him into action, to reveal himself as the kind of Messiah Judas expected. But if so, Judas was terribly wrong. And then there is the third explanation, the most difficult one, that somehow this was part of a greater plan, that as John says, Satan entered into him, raising the haunting question, if Judas had a role to play in salvation itself, was he truly free? Could he have chosen otherwise? And Jesus himself said words that deepen the mystery even more. The Son of Man goes as it is written, but woe to that man by whom he is betrayed. It would have been better for him if he had not been born. And Judas's end reflects that tragedy, because the Gospels give two accounts, one where he repents and hangs himself, another where he falls and his body's broken, and scholars have tried to reconcile these for centuries. But what remains undeniable is this: he did not live to see the resurrection, and that alone makes his story one of the darkest in all of Scripture. Now let's return to the disciples who fled, because 10 of them scattered in different directions into the darkness, and the Gospels say almost nothing about where they were in the hours that followed, except that John and another unnamed disciple followed at a distance, carefully trying to see what would happen next. And Peter who had just drawn his sword, Peter who had promised the most, also followed, but from afar, and eventually he found himself in the courtyard of the high priest, where servants and guards had gathered around a fire to keep warm in the cold night. And there, in that ordinary setting, something deeply human unfolded, because one by one people began to look at him, to recognize him, to ask simple questions. You were with him, weren't you? And each time Peter denied it, first quietly, then more firmly, then with urgency and fear. And the third time, as the words left his mouth, a rooster crowed. And in that exact moment, according to Luke, Jesus turned and looked at him, and we are not told how long that look lasted, but it was enough to break something inside Peter completely, because in that single glance everything came back, the promise, the warning, the failure. And Peter went outside and wept bitterly, and that moment shaped him forever, because the man who fell that low would later stand and preach after the resurrection, turning thousands of people toward faith in a single day. But that is a story for another time, because what matters here is this night, this one night that holds something far greater than just a historical account, because there is something profoundly human in it, something that reaches beyond time. Because think about it. How many times have you experienced your own Gethsemane? That moment when you know something difficult is ahead, when you ask for the cup to pass, when even the people closest to you fall asleep in your moment of need, when you are left alone with a decision that no one else can make for you. And in those moments, this story stops being just a story, because the one at the center of it knew what it meant to be abandoned, knew what it meant to ask and not receive, knew what it meant for the spirit to be willing while the flesh is weak, and still said, not my will, but yours. And that is what happened in Gethsemane. But there is one more detail that is often overlooked, because the Garden of Gethsemane still exists today. On the slope of the Mount of Olives in Jerusalem, there is a small garden with ancient olive trees, and some of those trees are estimated to be over 2,000 years old, which means that it is possible, at least in theory, that they stood there that very night, that they witnessed what happened, that they were there when Jesus fell to the ground, when the torches approached, when the soldiers came, and trees do not speak, but they remain, twisted, ancient, their bark like ropes. And everyone who stands there today becomes part of something continuous, a line stretching from that night to now, 2,000 years unbroken. And this is where our journey ends. We walked from the Last Supper through the Kidron Valley to the garden. We stood at a distance as Jesus prayed. We saw the torches. We heard the clash of weapons. We witnessed the kiss of Judas and the strike of Peter's sword. We saw the hands of a man bound who had just healed the ear of his enemy. And if this video gave you something, if you saw this night in a new way, if some detail stayed with you, share it in the comments. I really want to know, what struck you the most? Was it the kiss of Judas, the words Abba, Father, the weakness of Peter, or the healing of Malchus, the final miracle before the arrest? Write it down. I read every comment, and your thoughts often become the foundation for future videos. And by the way, if you are not subscribed yet, now is the perfect moment. Click the bell so you don't miss what comes next, because we are far from finished. Ahead lies the trial of Jesus, the night interrogation before Caiaphas, the morning council of the Sanhedrin, Pilate and his famous question, "What is truth?" And of course, the day of the crucifixion itself, minute by minute. And if you want to see all of that, subscribe. It's free. It takes only a few seconds, and it's the best way to support this work, because this work takes time. Every video is hours of studying sources, comparing translations, analyzing theology and history. And my goal is not just to retell the Bible, but to immerse you in it, to make every detail come alive. And I know you value that, because you made it this far. Thank you for that, seriously. And now one final question I want to leave you with. Jesus in the garden said, "Not my will, but yours." And that may be the hardest sentence a human can ever say, because to truly mean it is to accept what you don't want, to go where you don't want to go, to do what every part of you resists. So is there something in your life right now where you are standing before your own cup, where you have not yet said those words? You don't have to answer out loud, just think about it. Because this night is not only about Jesus, it is about every person who has ever faced the choice between what they want and what is right. Gethsemane is a place, but it is also a state of the soul. And if you have been there, you understand. See you in the next video. Glory to Jesus Christ. And one last small request. If this video touched you, leave a like. It's a small thing for you, but a huge signal for YouTube. More people will see it. More people will hear this story. Share it with someone close to you, someone who is searching, someone who asks questions. It's the best way to support the channel at no cost to you. And subscribe if you haven't yet. We are only just beginning. God bless you, and see you soon.